I was in this band, Planet. We started like touring internationally. You start to be like, oh yeah, this is like completely normal. Don't get emotionally attached to the stuff that you don't like. Focus on making music. Longevity is way more important than your next release.
Hello and welcome back to the Scrollstop podcast. My name is Tom and I'm the typical host, but once again I will be stepping away to let our July creative in residence Brendan have a chat with his current bandmate and former internationally touring artist Jimmy as they go through what it's like to work overseas in the music industry and then come back to Australia.
Hi, Jimmy. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm very good. Do you prefer Jimmy, James?
Let's go Jimmy. Yeah, I'm pretty easy with it, but
Yeah, because your
definitely more known as that.
your TikTok handle is James Robert Weaver.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I did that just because that's also my Instagram handle. So I was just like, I'll just make it even.
Fair enough.
And there's a lot of James Weavers in the world, so it's like, every time I try to make an account or something, I just be like James Weaver or Jimmy Weaver. It's like, how about Jimmy Weaver 4092? I'll just James Robert Weaver.
Nice. Well, if you could tell me a little bit about yourself, that would be great. So I've heard that you're a musician and as we've mentioned before, a TikToker.
Yeah. So, the big thing is the musician, and the big part of that is I was in this band, Planet. So that started in 2015, and I was like straight out of high school and did that pretty much all the way up into COVID, like 2022. Heaps of touring, which is really fun. The touring was a big part of that. And then the TikToking, I haven't actually been TikToking in a while because
You've mentioned this to me like privately before, but yeah.
Yeah, so I had a bit of time, like kind of when was I doing it? Like about a year ago. Like I was between uni semesters. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna fight the beast. I'm gonna like join TikTok, and I was like, oh, this is actually really fun. So I was doing covers and doing like bass lessons, and then uni got busy, so I stopped doing it. And then I came back. But when I came back, it was like in the time that Universal, I think some other record labels were feuding with TikTok. So the copyright stuff was really hectic. And so I was like, made videos that I thought were good of like some big pop songs, some less known songs with cool bass lines. I put them up and I'm like proud of myself. And then an hour later, I go to like check to see how it's going. It's like the video's just been muted. I'm like, oh. And it was just very like deflating. But then like not long after, I think it was like a week after that, I see a news article that Universal Music had sorted out the beef or something. So I was just a bit like, oh dude.
I feel like music in particular is just one of those like things that like has the most copyright like litigation. Was it like the most like suing people? It's so much of a like litigious nightmare.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess one of the big well-known ones is the Verve Bittersweet Symphony, how they like sampled
It was like a Rolling Stones B-side.
But it was like the Rolling Stones song, I think as well, was like a complete rip-off of some black musician 15 years before that. But yeah, it's just like crazy.
Litigation was the word I was looking for. But tell me a little bit about like a really, really big project that you've worked on and some of the highlights and lowlights of that.
Yeah, well, definitely the big project was Planet. And that was like, my career for 8 years.
Wow.
And so I'd say the highlights definitely was the international touring. Like, and it's funny, like, especially, like I said, I joined Planet when I was actually met Tom Peppert, who was the guitarist, on my 19th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And then a couple years later, we started like touring internationally. And when you're in it, like touring to the UK like 3 times a year, you start to be like, oh yeah, this is like completely normal. Like, I'll be back in Switzerland some other time. And now that it's not happening, it's like, oh, I don't know if I ever will be back in Switzerland. So all that stuff. But actually, touring, as like you would like, a lot of people know, it's like hard work as well. So it's like both the highlights and the lowlights. Like, there was on our last tour in the UK. There was, I'm not going to name like specific places. There are a couple like towns that we were doing gigs in. You'd like you drive into the town before you even get to the venue. You're looking out the window of the van. You're going, why are we here? Like, this town is like a ghost town. And then what do you know? You'd go load into the venue and there'd be no one there. It's like, why are we in this backwater town doing like this sucks? Like, but yeah, so I'd say yeah, touring is actually both.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is there any like particular like story from the tour? I know like a lot of musicians have Spinal Tap moments where it's just something that like hilariously goes wrong.
Actually, well, one place there was like a low light. Well, it was actually a pretty good show. Was Sunderland, which is like actually a fairly largish. I don't know if it's quite a city, but you know, it's a place on the map. And but I think the day that we did a gig, I think there was like football on and like a major festival nearby.
Oh wow!
And so like it was like a small city or whatever, but no one was on the streets at all. And that one was weird. We were just like, this is actually so eerie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one that springs to memory. Yeah, I'm sure there's probably is something that I'm missing out on. I'm just like, oh yeah. But
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why don't we go into more like a recent big project that you've worked on?
Yeah, so well actually the big thing recently with me is I've just finished my uni degree. So I was doing a Bachelor of Creative Practice, blah blah, essentially a music degree. And one of the major projects was like write and record an EP.
Nice.
Which I did, and I got pretty good marks for. But yeah, I was doing that like, so yeah, made this EP of kind of like hip hoppy electronic beats.
Nice.
But yeah, I was kind of making it, just being like, oh, this is a uni project, like still taking pride in my work, just yeah, but I wasn't being like, I'm gonna make this a commercial release. I'm just gonna la da da. But I ended up making a full EP, and then there's a few songs that people like I've showed some friends, and they're like, there's a couple songs that people are like, oh, this is really good. So I'm actually going to start like releasing music off that, which was like a very different sort of writing and recording, producing process than when it was with Planet, because with Planet it was very like thought out, very like, oh, we're going to go into the studio, we've got these songs, here's a release plan. And this is like, oh, I'm just making songs. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've got an EP. Oh, well, maybe I'll start putting it out. And I'm looking at the date that I actually created the song. It's like the 29th of May. I'm like, oh, I'm like putting it out in July or something. So actually I'm going to be, for some reason, I've decided to put out maybe one of the least commercial of the songs. Actually, I didn't even realize it, but it's due this weekend. Oh,
wow.
So it's like an synth ambient track.
That's really cool. How would you say like that's different to playing like an instrument? Because I think a lot of people, those are sort of worlds away. Yeah,
it definitely is. And I'd say, in what we do, because we're in a band as well, and in Planet's like the biggest difference is being solo, I'd say, and just sitting in my sister's old childhood bedroom. I've turned into like a little music studio. I'm just sitting there with the little keyboard. I go, oh, actually I have a song now. Oh, like, yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest difference. And actually for me, like working with loops now and samples, like that's massively different. And I'm loving the process of actually like being a bit of I'm not even a hip hop head, but like going through like random old forgotten songs or whatever, trying to find like samples. I really enjoy that process.
Yeah, it's a very like it's more of like a textile feel.
Yeah,
it's like the joy in editing in a way. Yeah,
no, it's definitely like when you said like textural or whatever, that's definitely like a much bigger focus. Like, because I feel like especially if I pick up like an acoustic guitar, the first thing you think of is like chords. It's like, oh, okay, I'm playing like minery thing. Oh, the chorus, now I need completely different chords. Like a lot of these songs that I have, they're a lot shorter as well. They're like 2.5 minutes. But it's like pretty much most of them is one kind of chord progression the whole way, and just like 2.5 minutes of like a vibe, I guess.
Yeah, no. A lot of the times when I've made electronic music, it's so much more emphasis on sound design because you've got almost a collage, and especially with synthesizers, you can really just make any sound that you're going for as long as you have like an idea of what it is, which is like very different to the world of like distorted guitars and distorted bass is what like we play together.
Yeah, and you're thinking, all right, so I'm just got like holding a chord. How can I make as cool as possible? Whereas even with the guitar, even though you've got all these pedals or whatever, you're still thinking, all right, how can I write the sickest riff? Or whatever.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you learn from sort of working on like your electronic music?
Yeah, it's a good question actually. I think a big thing is like, part of me, like I said, a lot of these songs are quite short and they aren't as like structured, like definitely not as chord focused sort of structured, which initially was like a bit jarring for me. I'm like, is this even a song if it doesn't like have a specific chorus? Like, if there's no like structural changes. And so kind of like changing my mentality around, I'm like, actually no, this is kind of cool. And being a little bit, I feel like I've learned to become a little bit less precious, like, or maybe even anxious is maybe even a right word, of being like, oh shit, is this song good enough? Oh, da, da, da. And I think partially because like, with this electronic music, I'm not paying for a studio. I'm not paying for someone else's time. A lot of it's just like it's made kind of quicker, which I think makes it easier to be a little bit more like, I'm gonna put it out and see what happens. Like, and I think actually, even though I wasn't the lyricist in Planet, like when you've got lyrics, there is definitely a much stronger emotional connection to a song. Like it is more like you feel like you're putting yourself out there way more than when you're like, here's a beat that I made that I think is cool.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think especially for a lot of like, I wouldn't say established, but like experienced musicians, being able to go to something that's so completely different to what you're used to can be very freeing in a way.
Yeah. And definitely when I first started doing it, it was never my intention to kind of like stick out the electronic thing. It really was just like having a bit of fun. Like when I very first started kind of making tracks this way, I was actually doing it while I was on tour with Planet. Like I'd be sitting somewhere, sometimes in a green room, just like, oh, I'm a bit bored. Like let's open up Logic and muck around with the soft synths or whatever in there. And like, oh, it's pretty fun just to put like a fat kick drum on a track. And so that's how it kind of started. And then, just like, went from being like, oh, like house music's fun to make, just and then the pad, and then it's like, oh, what if I go like or whatever, and just kind of grow. Yeah, it was like a very natural growth in that kind of way, if that makes sense. Like a little bit of like, oh, what if I did this, and I'm rediscovering stuff that it's existed in hip hop and electronic music forever. I'm not inventing anything, but like, it was that natural kind of curiosity progression of like, oh, maybe if I don't put the kick drum on every beat, maybe that'll be kind of cool. And then it is. And yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting to talk about. I think there's so much more we could get into if we had the time. But how about we move the conversation towards what advice would you give to like some younger people that are just coming into the music industry? Yeah,
I think actually I've given this advice to other some young people before, and I think, and specifically where I see like a lot of people get downhearted with music, and is the social media stuff actually. And I think the fact is not everyone, like, you have to do social media, and you should try to make it good, but like And I'm not saying, normally you wouldn't give out the advice and not everyone's cut out for that. But what I mean is if you don't enjoy it, like don't like kill yourself over it. Don't like, I see so many people like, oh fuck, I have to make all this content. I have to do this and that. I'm like, yeah, you do it, but just treat it like a box you have to tick. And so I'm specifically talking about social media, but like if you're trying to pursue, creativity, I think as a career, there are going to be like business side parts of it that you don't particularly enjoy, but you have to do it. And it's like, okay, you have to do it. So just do it and don't get like don't get emotionally attached to the stuff that you don't like.
Yeah.
Like, focus on making music. Just do the social media of like, hey, we got a new song coming out, blah, blah, blah. Don't do crazy editing if you don't want to do it. I think a lot of people, there's just so much like in the industry, like emphasis on social media, like you have to be a social media guru, blah, 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 blah. And I really don't think you have to. I think you have to do social media, but like if you hate it and it's like actually making you not enjoy making music, then just still do it, but just don't put any sort of passion into something that you hate.
And there's definitely alternative pathways, just jumping off what you said, to like doing social media. It's not always like the crazy, like following like reels trends and stuff like that.
I think that's a good way. Like what I'm trying to say is, I see a lot of people just really trying to like get viral or whatever, and they're just having a terrible time like emotionally with it.
Yeah.
Like they're just like, oh, this sucks. I hate this.
Yeah, because it's a little bit of a like a conflicting thing, because you want your music to be unique and stand out and to be like high quality, and then I think a lot of people sometimes feel railroaded into like, oh, but now I have to do the cliche like, oh, of course we do this kind of thing, or like of course, yeah,
and I still reckon like there's probably so many big artists that like a lot of them are great on social media. Some of them still aren't. Like, for example, even though he's a bit older, like Tame Impala like never posts, and he's doing like when he does a remix or something, it's still big. It's still a big deal or when he does post, it's like, oh, cool. Like, just make it work for you. And I'm picking on social media because that's the big one I see, but I guess there's other things that could be like the killer of like you really what you want to. I think longevity is way more important than like your next release.
Yeah.
Your like 10 releases after your next release are more important, than your one singular release.
I think where some of the anxiety also comes from is like there's a lot of Instagram accounts about promoting like bands and stuff like that. There's so many people like, I don't know, you've seen the guy with like the cigar, and he's like, oh, I see this guy all the time on my Instagram. He's like, here's what you need to do. Like you need to release a song every 6 weeks, and then you need to have TikToks every day for all those like things, the 6 weeks. And that like, if that's what's going to make you quit music, don't do it.
Yeah. Well, actually something recently when I was, leaning into the I was just like having a big kind of explore, I guess, of kind of, mostly experimental sort of modern electronic artists throughout. I was just exploring on Spotify, and there's so many artists that like have millions of streams. You're like, how the hell? And you like look them up. They don't. Yeah, they've just like managed to like find an audience with their weird whatever it is like music. And for me, it actually gave me a bit of confidence with these releases coming up. I'm like, oh, maybe someone will like my 2-minute beats. Like, yeah. Like, I don't think you need to be a guru at everything. Just, still think things through, but like, I just see a lot of artists like, killing themselves over how a social media post is going. It's like, dude, you're doing this because you like music, so just
make music.
Yeah, make music, do the post, turn off your phone, and go back to making music.
Another thing is like, just even like further going into your point is that's where like some networks can come really in handy. Like if you have a mate that like that posts Instagram, like you can get their help, or like you can. There's a lot of value in just using the people around you.
Yeah, Yeah, totally. And like, well, live music's still a huge thing.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, actually, kind of going back on the social, yeah, talking about like, yeah, trying to like with Planet, especially before COVID, like we were trying so hard to get on Triple J,
Mm.
and that just didn't happen to us, and it definitely affected like the way we felt about releases.
Mm.
And looking back now, I'm like, that was so dumb to I mean, a big radio station, huge career opportunity getting on that radio station, but it's just like it definitely affected us more than it needed to.
Yeah.
Being like, oh, Triple J didn't like our song. Oh.
And then I think also the thing on that is that like benchmarks are always changing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, totally.
I think 8 years ago, Triple J is in a different spot to where Triple J is now.
Yeah,
Like just in terms of like market share and
Yeah.
everything like that. And it's really, I think like just trying what you really like is more valuable than putting all of yourself into everything.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, the world is very, very big. And I've definitely realized, like, yeah, as I've kind of broadened my own vision musically, I'm like, oh man, there's people doing great things in so many ways.
Mm.
Yeah, it's just about figuring out how to do it the way you want to do it. And I think you can.
Yeah, which I think is a bit intimidating for people, like especially like people who are just getting into it. You see a lot of like people like learning, trying to like min max everything, like trying to get the most efficient for the least amount of effort. And I think if you really like doing something, you should take your time with it as well.
Yeah, I agree.
James Robert Weaver,
Oh yeah.
Jimmy, where can we find your work and where can we find how you and where you make music?
Yeah, so social media, it's the most important thing and you got to focus on it. So my handles are James Robert Weaver on Instagram, James Robert Weaver on TikTok. And when the music is released, it'll be Jimmy Weaver on all streaming platforms.
Nice.
Yeah. But you'll hear about it on my social media.
What distribution service do you use? Just curious.
So I am, with this first release, I'm going to try out this one called AWOL, which is like Through the Orchard. And yeah, it's a curiosity thing. So the way they work is they don't charge a fee, but they take 20%, like 20% cut.
Yeah.
Which is quite big actually. It's, if you think like, oh, what if my song does really well? That's a lot of money. But so yeah, they're tied to the Orchard, which I think is somehow tied to Sony. But their whole thing is that they're very selective about who they work with.
Oh wow.
And so that's their mark. I'm going to see if I don't know. I'm a bit suspicious. Not, they're legit. Like they're not a con artist, but like I'm a bit suspicious about how good they claim to be. But yeah, their thing is, oh, we only we are selective about who we distribute. So we're going to work harder than the other distributors to get you onto playlists. So you submit your music, and they kind of assess if they think you're good enough.
Wow.
But it's a bit weird. So the music that I'm releasing, it's like going to be my first releases. But they want you, the way you submit your music is like you submit your Spotify profile.
Oh, wow.
So like it's supposed to be for existing artists. So I was like, oh fuck it, I'll just submit Planet's Spotify profile. So, but it'll be coming out on a new Spotify page and Apple Music and blah blah blah. Jimmy Weaver. So yeah, I'm using them. I'm gonna see how it goes. But this first release is like an electronic ambient track. So we'll see. Like maybe it'll get on playlists. I don't know.
Do we get a name of the track yet, or is that still top
I
secret?
can give you the name. It's so this one, it's called Digital Landscapes Volume 1.
Oh, nice.
And I've like, so the whole vibe of this song is like using synthesizers. I've like made the sound of like a sad beach. So I've like synthesized these like bird sounds like and then using white noise and a filter going
Nice.
for the waves. And the thought behind it is actually like there was times on tour where like I might visit a university town during university holidays, or like a tourist beach town, like outside of the tourist season. And there's some of those places where you roll in, you go like, what am I doing? Like doing it. It's so eerie. It's so empty. But the beach places specifically, there was one, Den Haag, or the Hague in the Netherlands. And so like in Europe, it's very common that these beaches just have like all these businesses like right on the sand. But I'm there like in autumn. And so all the businesses are like boarded up. There's like a big boardwalk and everything. And you can just tell that during summer, this place would be cranking, like so busy. But I'm there in autumn and everything's shut and it's cold and like eerily empty. So that's the theme, I guess, of it. So Digital Landscapes Volume 1, which implies that there's going to be more. And I'm going to tell you they don't exist yet. But I'm going to try.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Yeah. And thank you to Scrollstop for having both of us.
Oh, yeah.
Have a great time. Say goodbye. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.